Jimmy Carter has got the view in his book, and I'm no great admirer of Jimmy Carter. I followed him on many things, but one thing in his book he did say that I hold with. It was the radicals on both sides that have kept peace at bay in the Middle
The
East.
Jews accepted the partition in 1947. The Arabs said, we don't want any Jews there. And the reason that the UN decided to have a partition is because of the fighting that started when the Mufti of Jerusalem said, we want to kill all the Jews, we don't want Jews here. And by the way, let me tell you something about the settlements. In 1948, all of the Jews were kicked out from the West Bank in East Jerusalem. And the Jordanians actually did pass a law saying that Jews cannot own land. Israel today, in pre-67 borders, has 1 million Arab citizens, about 80-90% of them Muslim. They kicked out all of the Jews from East Jerusalem and the West Bank for the first time in 2,000 years. So I consider it disputed territory. I don't think that anyone should say that there should be no Jews in the West Bank or East Jerusalem.
Well, what about the Katyusha bombs that keep going off? Are you going to address that?
What I was going to say, though, is that as far as the settlements go, I don't think in the long run they are helpful to Israel. I don't think, when I was in Israel, I was told they really weren't necessary for Israeli security. And most Israelis that I met were somewhat against the settlements themselves because the people get tax breaks for moving there within Israel. So this is a disputed topic within Israel.
I'd like to point out that Israel, I believe, is a signatory of the Geneva Convention. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
Yes, and one of the articles of the Geneva Convention prohibits the taking of land as a bounty of war.
Yeah, but you have to look pretty carefully at that. This is a very different situation than, say, when the Russians moved Russians into Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania after World War II to basically change the composition of the population. First of all, there is no formal Palestinian state. Israel won the 1967 war and took territory that Jordan had seized illegally in the 1948 war. So that territory is legally disputed. There are many legal theorists who will tell you that Israel has as much right to build settlements there as the Palestinians have to build their own housing. But let me
there's a precedent for people not building and land.
Wait, guys. Let me just ask you, hasn't most of the settlements, people have moved out of the settlements?
No. Let me just say this. I don't disagree.
They said they've dismantled a lot of the settlements.
That's
4 settlements in the north and then in Gaza. Gaza, they completely removed the settlement. But this is the issue. There's no evidence that if Israel had no settlements in the West Bank, that you would have essentially the Palestinians agreeing to a two-state solution. When they talk about settlements, they talk about Tel Aviv, they talk about Haifa, they talk about a lot. Their view is, and you can read it in their documents, they've never revised the charter even of the Palestinian Authority or the PLO. Hamas calls essentially for the elimination of any Jewish presence in the territory. The Israelis, you can argue, they've been they haven't been compromising enough, or they've done this or that. The point is, there's one side that has at least come to the table honestly seeking an end to the conflict. And, in 2000, you had the stars aligned correctly. You had Ehud Barak, who was an accommodating Israeli prime minister. You had Bill Clinton, who had Yasser Arafat to the White House 15 times. And yet, with Israel offering all of Gaza, sharing Jerusalem, over 90% of the West Bank, some land in Israel to compensate for land for some of those settlements right by the Green Line, Arafat basically walked out, started an intifada 3 months later to change the subject. That's the history of the conflict.
Let me ask you, though, let's go back to anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism. Are they the same? Are they different? Can you dislike what Israel is doing? Can you dislike the government? Because it says here, it says that we need to insist that while it's certainly acceptable to raise questions about the policies of Israeli government, as it is about the government of the country, it is not acceptable to single Israel as one of the countries on the face of the globe whose very legitimacy is up for debate. Now, that is something that's separate. You could criticize their government. I mean, we criticize our own government.
Israelis criticize their government very much.
Why can you be anti-Israel or anti-Zionist and not be anti-Semitic?
Well, there's a group of people. But there's a group of people who say that Zionism is a racist movement, that every group of people deserve a country, but Jews do not deserve a country. And that is in itself kind of questionable. And in the presence of horrible human rights, I want to give a stunning example. In a massacre by Lebanese groups against Palestinians in the early 80s, when the Israelis found out that Ariel Sharon, the defense minister, had failed to prevent it, that he may have somehow played a role indirectly, there were protests in Tel Aviv. There was a commission in Israel. The Israeli people demanded an answer. How could we even vaguely be, connected to this? He was fired basically by the Kohan Commission. Now, in the Arab world, unfortunately, they rally on the street with every suicide bombing in Tel Aviv. This is the reality that they cheer, that there are people on the Arab media in all these countries, and we pay Egypt effectively $3 billion a year so the government might not...
What about the...
But I want to
just say something about the Kedusha.
I do want to ask a question. The Jews have a country and what have you. Should the Christians have a country?
They do.
The Buddhists have a country? What, the Vatican?
But Europe. How about the rest of the world?
That's not a...
But Ireland...
It's not an exclusively Jewish state. It's only 75%.
Albert Einstein spoke best in Zionism.
Are you saying
But you said the Jews deserve a state. Is that to say the Catholics
You're implying that Judaism is just a religion. No, but you're implying that Jewish ethnicity.
Okay, this is a good question.
Albert Einstein said he was Jewish because the Germans didn't recognize him as German, and he gave everything to
Do you understand what John's saying? John's saying that, being a Catholic... Now, a lot of people think that Judaism is a race. They call it a race. A lot of people call being Jewish a religion, just like Catholicism, Protestantism, Baptism, and he's saying, does the Baptists have their own country? Do the Catholics have their own country? This is
an ethnicity.
Well, let me just give you an example.
Go ahead.
Saudi Arabia, despite the fact that it's protected by the United States, American forces over there are not allowed to wear a cross. They can't go to church. Basically, they can't even visit. In fact, Muslims are not even allowed to visit the two holy cities of Islam. This is accepted that 57 Muslim countries can basically regard everyone else in the world and every other people as inferior. In Israel, 75% of the population is Jewish, 25% is Christian, foreign, or Muslim. They have the same rights. They can go to their own churches.
Wait a minute. My mother's native language was Yiddish. So I don't know why some people think it's okay to question, whether we can have Italian Americans and not Jewish Americans. Of course, like Italians are Catholics, Jewish people have a religion.
Jewish Americans are fine.
Yeah, but I guess Italy has Italy. I guess.
But my mother's native language was Yiddish, and when her family, she was a baby, came back to Poland, they didn't want the Jews back.
Israel's a majority Jewish country. Is that a problem? That's the question.
But Zionism was based on the ethnic identity, not the religious identity. They were socialists. They were religious.
This is really hard to get in with these guys. I'm telling you, I'm having a difficult time today. You're saying that the Judaism is not it's like being Irish, being Swedish, being Norwegian. That's different. Being Jewish is a religion like Catholicism. Is that what you're saying? And you're seeing it that way. You're saying something different